Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sam and today I am sharing my most disappointing books of 2020. I feel a little bit nervous filming this because I very rarely give negative reviews. I very rarely give 1 or 2 star ratings because if I'm not enjoying a book, then I put it down and I don't finish it, and I don't rate books that I don't finish. Before I get started, I did just want to say that I didn't hate all of these books at all. There were just certain things that maybe didn't work for me. And whenever I give a book review, I always try to go into the specific details on why I didn't enjoy a particular book and why I've given it that rating. And so for that reason, there may be a few spoilers throughout this video. I'm going to try and talk in code as much as I can, and I'm not going to give away points of the plot for no reason, but I know that some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about could be considered a spoiler. And so if there are any of these books that you're planning to read, I will have timestamps linked in the description so that you can flick ahead at any point if you do want to. Okay, so the first book I'm going to talk about is The Cows by Dawn Porter. This is a contemporary fiction novel about 3 women. There's 3 different perspectives that are kind of alternated throughout the book, and 2 of the perspectives I didn't actually mind, but the one perspective I really hated. The first storyline follows Tara, who's a single mom working in television, and she does something in public that you wouldn't want to be caught doing in public, but someone sees her and they video it and it ends up going viral. And so the rest of that storyline follows the effect that going viral on social media had on her. The second storyline follows a woman called Cam, who is a lifestyle blogger, and she talks quite openly online about all parts of her life, but she starts to talk more about the fact that she's in her early to mid 30s and she never wants to have kids. And some people really relate to that and really like that, whereas other people don't. And so that storyline is kind of about trolling and the effect that that can have on a person. Both of those storylines I actually quite enjoyed and I thought that they were really interesting. However, my main issue with this book was the final storyline, which follows a woman called Stella, who I think she's in her mid to late 20s, and recently both her mom and her twin sister have passed away from cancer, and she's been told that she has a very high risk of also getting cancer at some point in her life. And so at the start of the book we learn that she's trying to decide whether to have this preventative surgery that would reduce her risk of getting cancer. However, she really wants to have a baby, and so she comes up with this idea. Because she's single, she doesn't have a partner, she decides to pretend to have cancer so that her boss will feel sorry for her, so that she can trick him into sleeping with her to get her pregnant. If I had known that that was a plot within the book, then I just wouldn't have picked it up, because I read this less than 6 months after I finished chemo and less than a year after I'd been diagnosed with cancer. And so reading that was really difficult, especially because the way that that storyline was concluded, I didn't feel very satisfied. I felt like her actions were being excused because she was grieving, and I just didn't agree with that at all. It's a shame because I think this is the worst book that I've read this year, but I really enjoyed So Lucky, which is another book by Dawn Porter. That was one of my favourite books of last year, which is why I think reading this book was so much more disappointing. And I don't think it would put me off reading any more of her other books because I did really like the writing. Just, yeah, it was bad. The next book I'm going to talk about is Normal People by Sally Rooney, and this book was so hyped. Even last year, before I joined Bookstagram or BookTube, I can remember seeing this book everywhere. This is about 2 people, Marianne and Connell, who at the very start of the book are in school, but they're very different because Connell is popular, he's on the football team and he has lots of friends, whereas Marianne is a lot quieter and more of a loner. Connell's mom works for Marianne's family, and after school one day he goes round to pick his mum up, and him and Marianne get to talking, and their relationship kind of goes from there, and the book follows them through the rest of their school years and then through their university years and their early 20s as they weave in and out of each other's lives. One of the main issues that I had with this book, especially in the beginning when I first started it, was that there were no speech marks in the entire book, and I'd never read a book like that, and I found it really distracting. I think I just couldn't get on with the writing style. This is one of those rare occasions where I think the TV show is so much better than the book, because whereas the characters in the book felt very flat, the actors did such a good job of bringing them to life and injecting that emotion that I felt was missing. I know that some people would disagree with me, but I did just think that the TV show was so much better. Next on my list is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, and this is another book that was super popular earlier this year on Bookstagram, and it sounded like the kind of book that I would really enjoy because it's a historical mystery, and it follows this girl called Kaya who was abandoned by her family when she was really young, and so she essentially raised herself living in this marsh. When a young man man from the local town is found dead, the police assume that it was murder, and the local townspeople have this prejudice against Kaya. They call her the Marsh Girl, and so they assumed that she must be responsible. This is one of those books where, even though it wasn't to my personal taste, I didn't hate it and I didn't think that it was a bad book. I gave it 3 stars, and I can definitely see why so many people like it. The writing is very descriptive, and I could picture myself in this marshland. It was very vivid in my mind, and I liked following Kaya's story. I do like books that are like that, where you're following one main character and you're learning about them through various stages of their life. My main issue was that it was so slow, and I was really disappointed. I think because I'd waited so long to read this book. I put my name down for it at my local library, but my library was closed for a long time because of the UK being in lockdown, and so when it finally reopened, I think I was something like 8th or 12th on the list to borrow it. And you know when you've been waiting to read a book for so long that when you finally read it and it just feels average, it almost makes you feel more disappointed. I think I would still recommend this book because I know so many people who have said this is one of their favourite books of the year. Maybe it is just because I waited so long to read it, and so I hyped it up quite a lot in my head, but it did just leave me feeling a little bit disappointed. The next book on my list is Vox by Christina Dalcher. I hope I pronounced that right, but this is dystopian fiction set in the not so distant future in our world, where women have been completely stripped of their rights. All women have to wear these bracelets that mean they can only speak up to 100 words per day. If they go over that, then they get given an electric shock. And we follow this woman called Jean, who was or is a scientist of linguistics, and she's recruited by the government to help with this secret project. And the story kind of goes from there. The idea behind this book is really interesting, and it's been marketed as the next Handmaid's Tale, but I think it was just not very well executed. The pacing for this was all over the place. It was so slow in the beginning, and I found it really hard to get into. I think I actually put it down for like a week and then picked it back up. The middle section was fine, but then the ending was so rushed. You know when you're reading a book and you can tell that you've maybe got less than 50 pages left, and you're thinking, how is this going to end? Because this is a standalone as far as I know. But towards the end I was getting really confused because these things were happening so quickly that I didn't really understand what was going on, and so I had to keep going back to reread massive chunks, and it was just a bit of a mess, to be honest. I think I ended up giving this 2 stars in the end, and to be honest, I think I was being a little generous. Hello, Bob, you want to say hi? The next book I'm going to talk about is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I think this is described as historical fiction because it follows a fictional rock band during the 1970s who were super popular. Everyone knew who Daisy Jones and the Six were, and their album Aurora was super popular. But then on the night of their final concert they split up, and no one has ever known why. This is another book that was super hyped earlier this year. I think it actually won the Goodreads Choice Award last year. And I, again, can kind of see why so many people like this, because I really love Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing. I think she does such a great job of writing characters that feel very real. It's actually written in this interview style, which I thought was really unique, and I did enjoy that. I've heard really good things about the audiobook because apparently that's a full cast, and so you get that immersive experience. My main issue with this book was the ending. It felt very anticlimactic because throughout the story I felt like we were building up to something that was going to be really shocking. Maybe there was going to be this huge twist, and it just never happened. I also really didn't like the 2 main characters, Daisy and Billy. I thought they were horrible people, and I would have liked to have seen more from the other band members and the other side characters, but they were really overshadowed by Daisy and Billy and all of their crap, and so it meant that even now I can't really remember any of the other characters. Maybe it's because I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo right before I read Daisy Jones, and I really loved that book. It's one of my all-time favourite books, and so in comparison there was no comparison. Evelyn Hugo was a 5-star read for me, whereas Daisy Jones was very average. I think I gave it 3 stars. However, I am really looking forward to reading more of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books because I do think she's a great writer. Okay, so the final book I'm going to talk about is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, and this is actually really heavy. I don't know if I'm going to be able to hold this up, so I might just pop it up there. I'm sure most people will have heard of this book, but if you haven't, it's the prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy, and it's set during the 10th annual Hunger Games, so not long after the war between the capital and the districts, and it follows a young President Snow as he mentors the female tribute from District 12. What I did really like about this book was learning about the early days of the Hunger Games and how they were very different back then when they first started in comparison to the Hunger Games that we know that Katniss takes part in. So I did really enjoy the first half of the book. However, the second half of the book, I didn't really think it was needed. I didn't think it really added anything, and it all just felt a bit pointless. There's, I guess, a romance in this book that I really didn't like, and I didn't think it was believable at all. The characters had no chemistry, and so it made no sense. I know that a lot of people were really disappointed that of all the prequels that we could have got for the Hunger Games, we were given this book about President Snow. I didn't personally mind that so much because I don't mind following the villain within the story. However, I did question as I was reading, was this really needed? Especially because this is a big book. I mean, look at that. You could have quite easily cut a third, if not half of this book, and it wouldn't have made a difference. I think if I had to rank all of the Hunger Games books, it would go Hunger Games, Catching Fire, this book, and then Mockingjay at the bottom. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the video. Thanks for watching if you've made it this far. I feel like it's been a little bit all over the place, but hopefully I can manage to pull something together in editing. But if you've read any of the books that I mentioned, please let me know in the comments what you thought of them. Let me know if you agreed with what I've said. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.